Good evening, Jets fans. This is Glenn Naughton. You are listening to JetNation Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to those of you who checked out the podcast from the other night with Manish Mehta from the New York Daily News. If you haven't already, go back and give that a listen. We talked a little bit about Adam Gase and Manish's feelings on that hiring. I talked about my feelings on the hiring. And, now a few days have passed, and I said the other day, and I meant it, man. Listen, I understand the skepticism with this hire. I understand that folks were upset by it. I said the other night that my biggest reason with that being upset with this hire was the way Adam Gase dealt with the media in Miami and some what appeared to be maturity issues. But the Jets introduced him the other day officially at One Jets Drive in Florham Park. And, let's get this right. Let's get this out of the way right off the bat. The facial expressions from Adam Gase, people had a lot of fun with it. I had a little fun with it. But, it's time to get past that already. What the hell was going on there? I have no idea. Nobody does. I've heard some people with some pretty wacky theories. But the bottom line is that the guy is it was tough because I'm of the belief that, I'm not normally going to notice or comment on the way someone, if there's a quirky, an oddity, something that stands out about somebody. But let's be honest, with the Adam Gase situation the other day, you couldn't not mention it. You couldn't not notice it. That was bizarre. There's no other way of putting it. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. But what I am saying is that who cares? It's about winning football games. That's what the guy was brought in here to do. Whether or not he does that enough to hang around for a while remains to be seen. But I understand the snickering that went on during and after the presser on Twitter, on Facebook, on the forums at JetNation.com, which, by the way, if you're not signed up yet, why aren't you? Go ahead and get in there. Let yourself be heard. Jump in there with your fellow Jets fans, JetNation.com. Sign up, log in, and get going in the forums. Most active message board on the internet, folks. Over 800,000 views on the JetNation pages in the first week of this month, driven largely by the Adam Gase news. But real quick, before I go any further, I want to thank our sponsor, Mile Social. Mile Social will help your business with their social media, websites, and SEOs. Check them out at milesocial.com. That's MILE social.com. Basically, if you're running a business and you're wearing a lot of hats, you want to take a little bit of that, take some of those responsibilities off your plate. Let Mile Social handle your social media, and they'd be the ones to do it for you. They do a great job there. So again, back to the Gase hiring. It's been really outside of the fans, which I would include myself initially. I would include really most of Twitter. I know Rich Cimini, ESPN, did a poll. 68% of Jets fans said they were upset with the hire, which, again, I understand. But if we're going to be fair about this, and it's not even about being fair and all, to me, as I said the other day, I'm just tired of being pissed about the coach. Adam Gase didn't do great things in Miami, but he did, relative to what he had to work with, he did an all right job in terms of wins and losses. Won some games with Brock Osweiler. He didn't have a great quarterback situation because Ryan Tannehill was often hurt. When Tannehill wasn't hurt, he was over 500. And purposes should be better than all the quarterbacks he had to work with in Miami. So hopefully that means, bigger and better things ahead for the Jets. Offensive guy, as we know, first offensive guy they've hired in a million years. Kotite was the last one. He was a complete disaster, as we are all too aware. But listen, he ticks the boxes. Head coaching experience, offensive side of the ball. Done some good work with quarterbacks. Are there question marks? Absolutely. But that, that's the thing is there are no candidates who didn't have question marks. Tell me who you wanted. Tell me which head coach you wanted brought in here, and I guarantee you that coach would have question marks. Mike McCarthy, yeah, he won a Super Bowl. Fantastic. He won a Super Bowl almost a decade ago. And he's running the same plays now that he was back then if you listen to, the guys that played for him, the guys that played against him. That's why he's losing to the Arizona Cardinals, the worst team in the NFL, despite having arguably the most talented quarterback in the NFL to work with. I mean, yes, I understand it's a team game. But the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, I mean, come on. You're going against the worst team in the NFL? And I know that one game doesn't define a coach, but Mike McCarthy wasn't very good this year. It wasn't a whole lot better the year before. You want Matt Rule. I wanted Matt Rule. Matt Rule was my top. Well, I take that. I think by the end, I would say Todd Monken, who got the OC job. And was it Cleveland? He would have been my top choice. Matt Rule would have been my second. But Monken, untested, unproven as a head coach in the NFL. Matt Rule, same thing, and very little NFL experience. Didn't have a lot of connections. Cliff Kingsbury, not sure if he was ready to be a head coach, maybe more of an offensive coordinator type. But the bottom line is that there is no coach available that didn't have question marks. None. So no matter who they picked, miserable people were going to find a reason to dislike it. And I disliked the Gase hire initially, but in taking a step back, looking at the overall record with the quarterbacks he had, the players who have come out in full support of it, and not just current players, not just star players, guys who had different levels of success with them, different degrees of success. The coaches that have hired him, Nick Saban, John Fox, guys who have national championships and Super Bowl rings. He's done some good things. He's a highly regarded guy. And today, we get news that the Jets go out and they get, and this makes the hire a heck of a lot better. They go out and get Gregg Williams, former defensive coordinator from the Cleveland Browns.
Put your testicles in the C-gap.
And there's a little bit of Gregg Williams for you. Compliments of Hard Knocks, HBO's Hard Knocks. He's an intense guy. He's not afraid to get in the player's face. He's not afraid to let them know who's in charge. He's going to call an aggressive game plan. And hopefully he's going to call a game plan that matches. Huge hire. This is a huge hire. Adam Gase, to me, this offseason would have been a lot worse if they had to go with another unknown as a defensive coordinator. Because let's face it, Adam Gase, and he said it himself, he's going to focus on the offense. And I don't have a problem with that because we're seeing that more and more around the league where head coaches are specializing on one side of the ball and they bring in strong assistants to work with. So now, if you'd brought in a first-time coordinator or a coordinator who hadn't had much success on the defensive side of the ball, while knowing that your head coach is going to be working the offensive side of the ball, that would have been a little bit scary. I did have a nervous moment. When news broke that the Jets were close to a deal with Gregg Williams, I was sure it was going to get done. I was sure it was a done deal. But then 3-4 days passes. It's not done. Rumors of the Redskins calling him in because they're interested in him. And that was concerning. But they get it done today. Gregg Williams officially announced by the team via their Twitter page that he is on board. He is the guy. Like stories now will become players who are likely to see some role changes. Maybe some guys who will or will not be re-signed. Maybe some guys hit the trading block. We've already seen a few names. So if you want to look at who could step up, who can do some big things, first two players that come to mind for me, Leonard Williams and Darren Lee, depending on how they choose to use Darren Lee. I know a lot of people have been saying from the time he was drafted and for the last year or so that they should move him to the outside, let him try to use that athleticism, that speed to beat some of these offensive tackles to the quarterback. Or do you leave Darren Lee on the inside at your middle spot where he can cover more ground with that speed, but then that kind of, where does that leave with Avery Williamson? So I think we see Darren Lee get a look on. I think we should see Darren Lee get a look on the outside with Williamson in the middle. Or again, I think there's a couple different chances. Either way, whether they keep Darren Lee in the middle and occupy blockers up front with linemen and let him make plays, or if they move him to the outside and let him get after the quarterback a little bit, I think we'll see an uptick in production from Darren Lee. I think we might see the same from Leonard Williams if they're going to move him inside in a 4-3 defense. Again, this is all assumption at this point, but I think that's sort of the universally the most frequent stab in the dark that we're seeing writers, beat writers, analysts make about this 4-3, and then I'll move Leonard Williams to the inside with three extra guys, or with three other guys with their hand in the dirt, getting after the quarterback. And I think Leonard Williams, with a different role in this scheme, rather than being an end on a 3-4, hopefully that means more production for him. I think we will see some improvement. There's been talk that the Jets are looking to move Leonard Williams. Now, I'm not saying they won't, but I can't see a team being desperate to add a guy who's due to make $14 million and have the season Leonard Williams just had, because it wasn't a very good one. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't as bad as Twitter tells you. It wasn't as bad as the anti-Leo folks that you see on, if you pop into JetNation on the forums, you get people that hate him. He's a bust. He's a Mac pick, so he must be terrible. But the reality right now with Leonard Williams is he's been a good player, but not a great player. And when you're drafted 6 overall and you're not a great player, you're, by definition, you're a bust. Does that mean a new system can't mean better results? Absolutely not. So this is, again, hoping that with Gregg Williams coming in, that there are bigger things down the road for Leonard Williams. And another player who can be hugely impacted by this, Tremaine Johnson. And boy, you better believe Mike McCagnon wants Tremaine Johnson to turn things around, because they gave that man a lot of money, and he didn't get a lot of results. He had a nice little. We know how his season ended, benched from missing meetings. Kind of a, wasn't the first time we saw that under Todd Bowles. But Tremaine Johnson was a member of the St. Louis, Los Angeles Rams under Gregg Williams when he played some of his best football. And he had the same secondary coach in Denard Wilson, DB coach. We'll see if that remains the case. If Gregg Williams wants to keep Denard Wilson around, it'll probably be his call. And if so, you have the two guys who were with Tremaine Johnson when he played his best football. Now, kind of a staple of Todd Bowles' defenses during his time here was to take his corners and to play them about 300 yards off the ball and just get eaten up underneath. So with Gregg Williams, with a more aggressive scheme, do we see more press man coverage from Tremaine Johnson, which is in the past? I certainly hope so. And if that can help get him turned around, and Leo and Darren Lee improve their play, then those are all big steps in the right direction. But one of the question marks becomes Jordan Jenkins. Now, Jordan Jenkins is a guy who had a career-high 7 sacks this year and did a nice job as a 3-4 outside linebacker, who you would think in a 4-3 would project a defensive end. But you have to wonder, do the Jets view him as a guy who can play defensive end? And if not, do you trade him? I mean, I don't think you can get a whole lot for Jordan Jenkins, but certainly for an edge-setting linebacker who can get you 7 sacks, and let's face it, that's year 3 for him. We could still see some improvement from him in the right system, and that's 7 sacks for a team that didn't have a very good secondary. You send them somewhere where teams can hold up in the passing game. Maybe Jordan Jenkins becomes an 8 to 10 sack a year guy. He's shown he can get to the quarterback a little bit, and there's value in that in this league. was a defensive end in this scheme. Do we see Jordan Jenkins shipped off to add a draft pick? One of the many questions that'll be answered in the coming months. And of course, Henry Anderson. Henry Anderson is not under contract. He's an unrestricted free agent. But there were many folks, myself included, who thought the Jets should have been making him a priority to get him signed. But now, if they don't feel he can play in that scheme, then he could be on his way out. We know that was the reasoning behind the Indianapolis Colts trading him for a 7th, was the fact that they were going from a 3-4 to a 4-3, and they felt like he wasn't a fit in a 4-3. So if the Jets feel the same way, then that could be it for Henry Anderson. He could be on his way out as well. So lots of questions, many questions that will be answered this coming off season, and it was a bizarre year for the Jets. They looked decent early on. Of course, that big win early, and just found a way to blow it. We learned today. There was a report that Todd Bowles, and I'm going to try to find who this came from, but the Bills, I talked during the season, many people mentioned after that Buffalo game, how in the world do you not fire Todd Bowles after that game? It turns out now that Buffalo game that they lost at home to Matt Barkley, to shellacking, that is when the Jets started their head coach search. So that's one positive. I felt Todd Bowles should have just been let go at that point, save him having to go through the last few games of the season. Jets let him ride out the string and would play out the string, and it also turns out Todd Bowles was apparently speaking with Bruce Arians at that time about a defensive coordinator job, because even he knew he wasn't going to hang around after that performance. And Bowles lands in Tampa with Arians. Not really our concern with, having moved. But what I wanted to do now, because I did this the other day, and as I said during the Manish interview show, that I had done an episode a night or two before that didn't air. We had to pull it because it didn't record about 85% of the show. So what I did on that episode was I went over 2018 report card, team report card, player by player, including basically guys who are still on the 53 or guys who earned some consideration to return. A couple guys who are free agents who aren't under contract but I think could be back, and grade how they performed this past season. So we'll do a little bit of that. And by the way, tomorrow night we're going to have a short special show. We're going to talk with Associated Press Jets beat writer Dennis Waszak. He's going to come on. He's going to talk about Gase. He's going to talk about Williams. He's going to talk about some of the things I just covered, the things of that nature. So there will be another show tomorrow. Up in your iTunes downloads or whatever device app you're using. But in wrapping up, key players still on the roster or could be back or will be back next year and grading their 2018 performances. So starting it off with quarterbacks, of course, Sam Darnold, he gets a B. Gave Sam Darnold the B because despite the shaky start, and he was, for the most part, if we're being fair here, he was pretty bad early on in the year. One or two games that stood out, but missed on a lot of throws, held on to the ball too long every now and then, didn't see open receivers. That was something we saw fairly often. But he was a rookie, and I've said it many times before. I said it when he was drafted. I was looking forward to the second half of the year more than I was the first half, because you knew there would be bumps and hiccups in the first half of the year, and there were. Sadly, he had that injury that knocked him out and caused him to miss a chunk of those final 8 games. But basically, through the first, in his first 9 starts of the year, he had 6 touchdowns. 11 touchdowns, 14 picks through his first 9 starts. and then missed a few weeks, as I said, and then he came back over the last few weeks of the year, throws 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, weeks 14 through 17. Looked like it made big plays on the run, made some unbelievable throws. He made some mind-boggling, eye-popping throws. So the types of things you expect to see from a guy who you're going to build your team around for years to come. So Sam Darnold gets a B. Josh McCown gets a C-. When he was on the field, he was pretty much a disaster. But I don't want to undersell the importance of having not just a veteran quarterback behind Sam Darnold, but a veteran quarterback who really, very early on, made it that his priority was to mentor Sam Darnold this year. He wasn't, I think sometimes when you get these veteran quarterbacks sitting behind young guys, they may not be fully invested in developing that guy because there's a little bit of resentment, a little bit of, I want to be on the field instead of this guy. But that wasn't the case here at all. Josh McCown, plenty of value there. Was going to grade Davis Webb and give him an incomplete because no, he is not due to be on the roster. No, he did not play last season. However, the Jets are going to need a backup. Whether McCown comes back as a backup, they'll still want a third quarterback. And if the Jets liked what they saw in Davis Webb, then he's a guy that can come back and compete for a backup spot next season. Isaiah Crowell, moving to the running backs, we gave him a D on the year. Outside of his one big game, and, thinking about it, being a bit more fair and thinking about this, because I did write this a couple weeks ago, he maybe deserved a C. He wasn't great. He had his 4.8 a year, 4.8 a carry on the year, which is obviously a pretty damn good average. However, he had that one game in week 5 where he averaged almost 15 yards a carry, and that had a huge impact on his average yards per carry. You take that one game out, and he was at 3.6 a carry. But to be fair to him, this O-line, their run blocking was not good at all. And that's due, no running back was going to succeed behind this O-line. So I gave Isaiah to start with, but I think a C is probably more fair. He's a guy who he may be around next year. He may not. The cap hit, if he's let go, is pretty minimal. If I'm not mistaken, he would the Jets would save $3 million of the $5 million he's due. The Jets would recoup $3 million, and $2 million would become dead money. But we'll see what happens there. Eli McGuire, guy who got some run late in the season, played well, scored touchdowns down the stretch, through the air and on the ground. Good blocker. Again, yards per carry was garbage, but as I said with Crowell, that O-line was just so bad at opening up holes for the running backs that we went and gave Eli McGuire a C-. These backs didn't have much to work with on the ground, so it's hard to put it all on them. Trenton Cannon, rookie running back, gets a D. Didn't play a whole lot. He really, one thing that jumped out in camp, and it showed up on film, the guy he's just so damn fast. He really is. Whether or not he's going to be a big-time player or even a good player, we don't know yet. But I've said it a couple times. I've tweeted it. I've put it in articles. He's a guy you stick with for a little bit. You give him a couple of years before you give up on him. Because, especially the way he came along as a special teamer, you just consistently look like the fastest guy in the field, or one of the fastest, if not the fastest, every time you got a good chance to watch him at full speed. So I think Trenton Cannon he's too to give up on him this early. But to be honest, I've said that in years past with players, and the guy's cut, before camp comes around. You just never know. But I think based on what Trenton Cannon can do, I think you keep him around for a year or two, try to develop him as a multi-dimensional guy. He can catch the ball a little bit, excellent special teamer, and try to open up some holes for him in the run game, and I think he'll make some big-time plays. Bilal Powell, we gave an incomplete because he spent most of the season on an injured reserve, and it's unlikely to be. If he does heal up completely and he's healthy, I could see them bringing him in as a tryout. But in all honesty, I think they will move on from there. And best of luck to him, by the way. Just class guy. If you don't like Bilal Powell, there's something wrong with you. Moving on to wide receivers, Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson gets a C+. Absolutely fantastic down the stretch. was quiet for much of the year, and that was due largely in part to the fact that he wasn't targeted. I mean, he was getting open, and when he was targeted, Darnold was often off the mark. So I don't think it's a case where Robbie Anderson played poorly. I think Robbie Anderson just didn't see the targets he should during the final 4 or 5 weeks of the season. For one reason or another, Jeremy Bates realized Robbie Anderson when it was on his roster. Whether it was Bates or Darnold, whoever it was, they started targeting him, and he looked like a different player. And he kind of showed that, yeah, he's shown it every year he's been in the league. If you deliver the ball to him on target, and you target him consistently, he will absolutely be 1,000 yards a year type of guy, if not much more. He's that good. But he's either getting overthrown or not getting targeted. And then I got to hear about how he's garbage. The number of people who've told me Robbie Anderson sucks, he's garbage. I've heard people say get rid of him, cut him because you got a penalty. I mean, Jesus. Team hasn't had a legitimate, consistent downfield threat since Wesley Walker, and people want to get rid of him because he got a flag. And I get the arrests and all that, but you have to look at it that, they're accusations. They weren't proven. And really, when you boil it down, you get down to it, he was guilty. Worst case, if he had been, charged and found guilty, he would have been guilty of being an asshole. Pardon my French. But that's basically what it would have been. So Robbie Anderson gets a C+. Whatever did happen with him, whether he said what they said he said or if he did what they said he did, hopefully, because we hear it all the time. Guys do dumb stuff. They say, that the experience changed them and they grew up and blah, 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 blah. Well, this is Robbie Anderson. This offseason is Robbie Anderson's chance to prove that he's grown up. And if he has, and if he stays out of trouble, he's a big, bright future for that kid. Quincy Enunwa gets a C. Spent a lot of the season injured. Was Arnold's favorite target early on. Saw his targets dwindle a little bit when he came back, but still a productive guy. Jets gave him a 4-year deal. That was good news. Great job by them locking him up for a while. And so now you just you sit back and you hope the guy can stay healthy. I think that a lot's made of the injury stuff, which makes sense. But even this year, I think that down the stretch when they sat him for the last couple games, I think that was precautionary. I don't think he was hurt that. Like, no need to run him out there and risk him. These games don't matter, and they IR'd him for the year with a couple weeks to go. Jermaine Kearse, he's our first F. How do you not give Jermaine Kearse an F for this season? What an unbelievable letdown. How you go from 2017, you have 65 catches for 810 yards and 5 touchdowns, and you come back the next year and you basically half of that or worse in every category. 37 catches, 371 yards, 1 touchdown. But he is probably, of all the players the Jets have to think about re-signing, Jermaine Kearse might be the most interesting. Because you have to sit back if you're the Jets, and you have to say, is this guy was that the aberration? Or is he the guy he was in 2018? Or is 2018 the aberration? Because I'll tell you what, even if he's somewhere in between that, if he can be a 50-catch, 600-yard, 3-4 touchdowns as a depth guy, that's not bad. I think if I had to guess, I'd say he's the 2017 version. I think he's a good player, but I think he got phased out of this outfit. He was frustrated. Not saying that makes it right that he did look to be giving less than maximum effort. If you can get, because now the thing is with Kearse, because the things went down the way they did, you might be able to get him on a 1 or 2 year deal for pennies on the dollar for what he's capable of producing. So do I think he'll be back? If I had to guess, I would say no. Would I be back? I wouldn't. Again, as a depth guy, especially you figure the Jets are going to draft a receiver at some point. So you're going to have Anderson, Enunwa, Curse, and the guy we're going to talk about next, Deontay Burnett, who we didn't see enough of to grade him. He gets an incomplete, but I included him because, well, first of all, he should have been playing a lot more. He should have seen enough reps to get a grade. Again, Todd Bowles. We didn't see much of him. When he did, when they finally play him in Week 17, 5 catches, 73 yards. And for people talking about, I've had people say, who cares if Deontay Burnett and Derek Jones played well in the season finale? That was a meaningless game. Okay, that game wasn't meaningless for the Patriots. And that game wasn't meaningless to Burnett and Jones, who are going to be busting their asses to make an impression. You're a young NFL guy who hasn't had a chance to get on the field, and you're trying to prove you belong. I don't care if you're 0-15. You're treating that game to you. That's your chance to show what you can do against legit competition, and you're doing it against a team that's trying to win a game to help their playoff positioning. This isn't Week 17. The Pats already have home field locked up, and they're playing their backups. And their backups are playing, and they're half-assing it because they know they got a long playoff run coming up. This is a team fighting to win a game for playoff position, and these are young players who are trying to prove that they belong in the NFL. About doesn't matter. Week 17, season was over. Not for those guys. As a fan, you might have been checked out as a fan. You don't think Deontay, you don't think Burnett and Derek Jones were trying to make an impression in that game? You got to be out of your damn mind. So Burnett played well. We'll talk about Jones later. Covering tight ends, though, moving to tight ends, Chris Herndon, he gets a B. I mean, he was you talk about a breath of fresh air because we were so bad for so long. We're talking about how bad the quarterbacks are and how bad the edge rushers are. There's no edge rusher. They've been bad at tight end for a long time, too. I mean, Chris Herndon is legitimately already looks like the best tight end this team has had in decades. He's going to be better than Dustin Keller. And Dustin Keller was probably the closest thing they've had to a good tight end in 20 years. So Herndon gets a B. He was named to the AP, I think it was the AP, all-rookie team today. Pro Football Writers, whoever it was. All-rookie team, Chris Herndon, tight end. Jordan Leggett almost gave him an incomplete because he didn't see a lot of targets, but he had enough reps. He played a lot. He just wasn't part of the game plan. But when he was, he showed he could catch the ball. He was a better blocker than I thought he would be, than a lot of people thought he would be. And hopefully he's a guy who can form a nice combination with Chris Herndon moving forward. But I gave Jordan Leggett a C-. Production wasn't great, but opportunities weren't there. When they were there, he caught the football, and he did a nice job as a run blocker. And Eric Tomlinson. He could depart via free agency. I'm giving him an F. Short and sweet on Tomlinson. I was signed to be a blocker, and this was probably his worst year ever as a blocker. Wasn't very good. So Tomlinson, guess, is on the way out. Clive Walford. Now, why, Glenn? Why is Clive Walford on the list? He played one damn game. He played Week 17 after being signed a couple days before the game. The reason Clive Walford is on the list is because I pointed him out or singled him out many times during training camp as a guy who was having a damn good camp. And Clive Walford, to me, is proof that every now and then you get these guys who they're good enough to be in the NFL. They've shown they can play, but for whatever reason, they don't catch on. And I'm not saying he's. Don't tell me, oh, now you're putting Clive Walford in the Hall of Fame. I say it all the time. People have this thing in their minds where every player is either Hall of Famer or garbage, and there's no in between. There is some in between. Some players are good. Clive Walford's a good player. He showed it in a couple of years with Oakland. 300-400 yards a season, a couple touchdowns. As a secondary target, as a second tight end, you could do a hell of a lot worse than Clive Walford. Clive Walford for the last 5 years would have been the best tight end on the Jets roster prior to this year, if not for Herndon. So Walford can play. Moving to the O-line. Oh, Walford gets an incomplete, but he's a guy to watch coming into camp next season. Now moving to the O-line, Kelvin Beachum. He gets a C. And that's about what he deserves. He's a mid-level guy. He makes mid-level money, and you get mid-level production. He gives up a couple sacks, but for the most part, he holds his own at left tackle. He's the reason why I've said the Jets will probably go, well, previously I'd said the Jets would probably go edge in round 1 because you can live with Beachum for another year. And I'm not going to lie, and other people do it, so I don't care. I'm flip-flopping a little bit right now with the 3rd pick. So I say it's got to be edge, got to be Josh Allen. Then I look at it and go, Mike Maccagnan drafted Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold may very well be the reason Mike Maccagnan keeps his job for the long run. And he's going to want to keep Sam Darnold healthy. It's going to be Jonah Williams. It's got to be the tackle. It's got to be the tackle. But then you look at the roster. Kelvin Beachum, he's a C. You don't have an edge rusher who's a C. I mean, you might have a guy who's an all-around C, but in terms of someone who can work, they don't have that at all. So you can make the argument that edge, a guy like Josh Allen, is a bigger need and may be higher rated than Jonah Williams. So expect me to go back and forth about 25 times between now and draft day. But let's face it, trade down. Trade the hell down, add some picks. All right, so Kelvin Beachum gets a C at left tackle. Left guard, Spencer Long, he gets a D. I know, I'm sure there are plenty of people who would want him to get an F because of the way he snapped the ball at center early in the year. That wasn't his fault, as far as I'm concerned. All right, that's Todd Bowles, seeing that he has an injured player who can't perform up to his normal expectations. He can't do something he has proven over years that he can do, and Todd Bowles leaves him in there. That was an idiot move by Todd Bowles. That being said, Spencer Long was still a bit of a disappointment. Even when he moved to guard, he wasn't great. He was, he wasn't terrible, but you could definitely upgrade. Given the Jets' salary cap situation and the fact they could cut Long with no cap hit, I would say at the very least you give him a look to try to win a job on the O-line. And if not, maybe you keep him for depth because there's not a lot of depth around the league right now. Brian Winters, right guard, C-, just too damn inconsistent. Winters has days where he looks like a monster, and then he has other days where it looks like he's torn an abdominal muscle again. I like him, love his work ethic, love his attitude, but he's a C- player, and I think he's back next year. I mean, there are just too many spots that need upgrading that I think Brian Winters isn't your biggest concern, but I don't think the Jets will rule out. I think they'll explore replacing a lot of guys, but I think Winters may be a guy who sticks around. Brandon Shell, he's done a decent job at right tackle, not great. That's somewhere, you'd like to have a guy on that right side who just, plows people over in the run game. Teams like to run to the right. And you just don't get that in Shell. You get one on this Jets O-line is the same story in that they're all better pass blockers than they are run blockers. And Brandon Shell fits that description. So I would expect him back next year, but the Jets in the next year or two, maybe looking to find a guy who can do it all versus a guy who can only, or who's so much better at one part of his game than another. Then a couple backups. Brent Quale, he gets a D. Not a great player. He's one of those guys. He's good enough to hang around on a roster. Good enough to be a. You can do again any of these offensive, O linemen that I'm mentioning all kind of fall in the same category. These backup level guys that in terms of backups you could do a lot worse. There are some terrible O lines around the league right now. Brent Quale, absolutely no problem with him staying on as a depth guy. Ditto for Dakota Dozier, who we gave a D+. And then Ben Braden. Ben Braden gets an incomplete, but we're throwing him on there because we think the team really likes him, and he could be a guy here and a chance to win a spot on the roster. Again, maybe just as a depth guy, but I'm not saying he will make the roster, but I think they like him enough that they're going to give him a really good shot to make it. So on the D line, moving over to the other side of the ball, Leonard Williams, as I said, good player, not a great player, C+. Got to the quarterback a few times late in the year. Well, really, just the last couple games. But all in all, not the quarterback for Leonard Williams. And for $14 million, you got to do more than that. That's why, as we said, hopefully under Gregg Williams, things get better. Henry Anderson gets a B. Jets' best D lineman all year. Probably should have been a B+. He's another guy who had 7 sacks. And said earlier he should have been a priority free agent for them. But given the fact they could be going to a 4-3, that could change. But you have to like what the Jets got out of him, especially for a second. So good job by Henry Anderson. He gets a B. Same for Steve McClendon. Always overlooked. Say it all the time. Underappreciated. And even this year, he was, again, number 2 graded defender per Pro Football Focus at 78.5. Did a really nice job. Very underappreciated guy. But I would imagine, given his age and the addition of Folorunso Fatukasi, that maybe they look to bring Fatukasi along and take that spot. I would not hate it one bit if McClendon came back on a 1 or 2 year deal. Nathan Shepard, it's another. I get it. I get young guy. Well, not young. 25-year-old rookie player out of a small school. I understand that, but man, I mean, you got to make a play at some point. 15. He averaged less than 1 tackle a game. Didn't have a sack. And 1 tackle for loss. That's just not good enough. And Nathan Shepard, if he doesn't make a serious leap, he could be the next mid-round pick who doesn't make it past his first season with this team. And no, I'm not. Again, what I said was, if he doesn't. I don't want to hear any of this. Oh, Glenn, you said Nathan Shepard was going to get cut. No, I'm saying if Nathan Shepard doesn't show significant improvement in year 2, he could get cut. Not saying he won't, because I like him. I think he's got some good tools, strong guy. I'd like to see him stick. Mike Pennell, B-. Look, part-time player. You know, middle of D-line, occupies blockers, doesn't do anything sexy. But what he does well. So he gets a B-. B- from Mike Pennell. He did a nice job. And Fatukasi, I mentioned, he played 1 or 2 snaps on defense this year. That's it. But I think he was drafted with an eye on allowing him to compete for Steve McClendon's job next season. So we'll see about that. Linebackers, Avery Williamson gets a B. Maybe should have been a B+, maybe a little higher. What I like is that after I did these, posted them on JetNation, I had a lot of people saying I was too generous, and a lot of people who said I was being too harsh. And that's kind of the way I like it. I want to be criticized for both, because if you're making everyone happy and everyone's agreeing, you probably did. When people are telling you did one side says left, the other side says right, you're probably right about in the middle, and that's where I like to be. So Avery Williamson, we gave him a B. Could argue for a bit higher grade, but career high 120 tackles, 3 sacks, a couple forced fumbles, a fumble recovery. Did a really nice job, a tone setter in the middle of that defense. Darren Lee gets a B-. Would have been a B, but getting that late season suspension for drug use, we don't know what it was. Not PEDS. People keep saying, oh, you PEDS. It wasn't PEDS. It was drugs. We don't know what drug it was. That's not our business. The league doesn't tell us that. But the bottom line is he was playing well. He was having his best season. Great in coverage. Still had some lapses in against the run. But all in all, by far his best season as a pro. So hopefully Darren Lee keeps trending in that direction. Neville Hewitt, his backup, who replaced him for the last 4 games, C-. Hewitt's a nice player. He turned out he was a better player this year than I expected him to be. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's back, because the Jets, as we mentioned previously, played safety in college. And then there's Kevin Pierre-Louis. He was an incomplete, but I put him on there because he was signed to a multi-year deal, so he should be around this year. And he was another guy who he didn't see a ton of reps because of injuries, but I liked him a lot from what we saw from watching him on film last year and then this year in training camp. Anthony Wint, he gets an incomplete, undrafted for rookie free agent who, whether it was Todd Bowles who really liked Rodgers or Mike McCagnon, we don't know. As I've discussed before, when we had Manish Made on before the season, he mentioned Wint as a guy the team really loved and he thought he would stick around. and he did on the practice squad, was added to the roster late in the season. So if the people who like Anthony Winter are still in that building, I would expect him to get a look as a depth/special teams guy. Jordan Jenkins, we talked about, career high 7 sacks. We went with a C+. It really did seem like he took a step back against the run this year. It doesn't, and I could be wrong, but it didn't feel like he played the run as well as he had in previous seasons. But even if you have a guy who's solid against the run and can be a guy who can get to the quarterback a little bit, I think he's a guy who has some value on the market if the Jets don't feel like he's going to be a guy who will fit their new scheme. Brandon Copeland, outside linebacker. Copeland gets a C. He did a nice job. Part-time player, 5 sacks. Had only had a half a sack in his couple seasons before that. And you got to give that guy a chance and see if he keeps trending in the right direction. Because it'd be nice to get a nice diamond in the rough, a steal that who can help you out and get into the quarterback. And staying on that note, Frankie Louvu, undrafted free agent, who saw a nice chunk of playing time, got himself a few sacks, 3 sacks, 11 QB hits as a part-timer. Louvu gets a C-. Josh Martin, outside linebacker, we give him an incomplete. Spent most of the season on IR, but one of the best special teams players on the roster. And I feel like he could probably he can get to the quarterback a little bit more if he had an opportunity, but not so sure he'll be a fit with what they're trying to do, with what they're trying to move to. In the secondary, Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams gets an A. No A+ because we would have liked to see more. We would have liked to have seen more interceptions out of him. Only had the 1 pick, but the guy's a monster. Absolutely fantastic player. The Jets used him at slot corner. They used him at free safety, strong safety. He played the boundary a little bit. He rushed the passer. He did a little bit of everything, and he did a little bit of everything really well. So all the people who spent all of last year and much of this year saying that the Jets were idiots for drafting a box safety at number 6, looks like they were the idiots for thinking he was a box safety. Marcus May gets an incomplete, unfortunately. I mean, really, probably could have graded him with 6 games. He did play 6 games. If I had to grade him, I'd probably say C+. Maybe even a B. I mean, he didn't play much, but he did play well. Had the big interception, 104-yard return. It was not a touchdown. Consistently plays well against the run. Just a good all-around player. And hopefully he's got to shake this injury bug. This thing where the second-round picks are terrible is, you thought it snapped with May, and he's been a damn good player, but now he's been hurt again. So you can't have that. Terrence Brooks, we gave an incomplete. He's due to hit free agency, but I'd like to see him back. I think with a better coaching staff, he would have a bigger role. Wayne Johnson, another F, and people might get mad. I bet he was one of the ones that people, you can't say he's an F. He wasn't an F. He was bad, but he wasn't an F. Listen, man, you got $74 million, whatever it was. You're getting beat like a drum most of the season early on, and then you come around a little bit, and it looks like you're turning the corner, and then you have a couple of big games, and then you get suspended for not showing up in time for meetings. Just big picture wise, it's an F. However, the glimpses, those little glimmers when he did play well, kind of reminded you why the Jets did pick him up. And it really highlights how important it is that Gregg Williams find a way to get him back on track. Morris Claiborne got a C. And again, we'll categorize him, as I said earlier, good player, not a great player, but not a terrible player. Jets Twitter might tell you otherwise. I've seen a lot of people they talk about the guy like he's, like he's never made a play, like he's never broken up a pass or gotten an interception. He makes some plays. He's a good player, not a great player. Darryl Roberts is next. We gave him a C, and that's largely based on how he played corner, because he did a nice job filling in when he did start. Moving him to safety, can't really say I know why they did that, because I really think Terrence Brooks is a better safety than Darryl Roberts. Todd Bowles, for whatever, Roberts at safety. That was a bit of a disaster. But much like the Spencer Long thing, to me, that's more on the coaches. Buster Screen gets an F. I hoped he would have a similar season to the one he had last year, which was probably his best season as a Jet, and that just didn't happen. Buster Screen regressed a little bit. He should be on his way out of town. Rashard Robinson is another F. I hate to say it's time to give up on the guy. I would say, actually, for a guy with as much talent as he has, I think you bring him to camp again next year and let Gregg Williams decide what to do with him. Eric Jones, mentioned him earlier. He gets an incomplete. Very impressive in training camp. Didn't get on the field weeks 1 through 16. When he finally did, Pro Football Focus rated him as one of the top cover corners in the NFL in week 17. But yet, Todd Bowles didn't see any need to get him on the field before that. Parry Nickerson, another guy who didn't see the field nearly enough. Saw it early on, struggled a little bit, but still did some things that opened, a few kind of raise your eyebrows and think, all right, this guy might be something. And I really hoped we'd see more of him in the season as the season went on. We didn't. Brandon Bryant, undrafted free agent safety, progressed well throughout preseason. Looked like he might make the roster, but it was just a stacked position. Spent the year on the practice squad, but I think he gets a chance to make a roster next year. So he gets an incomplete. And then special teams. Short and sweet. Lachlan Edwards gets a B. 45.9 yards per punt. Good enough for 6th in the NFL. Andre Roberts, A+. Over 1,000 yards as a kick return guy. Averaged 29.4 per return. Averaged 14.1 per punt return. Returned one of each for a score. Just an unbelievable year for him. He should be back. And then Jason Myers gets an A. Misses out on the A+ because he missed a couple extra points late in the season. And that wraps it up. That is the roster, at least as far as we see it, in terms of key players who can or will be back next season. In the coming weeks, there will be plenty to talk about because free agency is right around the corner. Next week's show, we will cover potential targets. Who might the Jets be going after? And hopefully have some more coaching staff updates on what's going on there. And as I said, tomorrow we will have another episode. It'll be a short one, probably another 25, 30-minute episode, as we did with Manish. But this time it'll be Dennis Wazak from the Associated Press. But thank you so much for tuning in tonight, Jets fans. Have a great night, and we will actually catch you again tomorrow. Hang in there, Jets fans. Looks like some good times are ahead.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie, it's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.